Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. A summer job, prelude. Summer holidays. Ichigo sighed. It hadn't quite reached his head yet. He silently flipped over and stared at the outlines of his closet. He groaned. And again. Just how did I get myself into this mess? His eyes flickered, and he remembered exactly how he got into this particular situation. Flashback. So. What is your answer? First Division Captain, Yamamoto's eyes looked directly into Ichigo. Ah. The usually rude, loud, grumpy Ichigo had now turned into a smaller, quieter person. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Ichigo left the captain's meeting hall. What the hell? He muttered softly to himself, not noticing the footsteps of a smaller Shinigami. What are you angry about now? Huh? He jumped. And crashed into the ceiling above him. This was Soul Society after all, and his physical abilities had increased greatly. I said. I know what you said. Geez, Rukia, don't sneak up on me like that. The smaller Shinigami grinned deviously. Well? Ichigo sighed. Well, it seems that, Mr. Big Guy up there, he gestured to the captain's meeting hall, wants me to consider taking the job of a captain, of the 5th Division. Silence. Of course, Ichigo added hastily, it'd only be temporary, and only during my school holidays. More silence. Ichigo looked down at his raven-haired friend. Oi, say something. He said, a bit annoyed that she was, well it looked like she was, blatantly ignoring him. She turned her head. Well. She looked at him, her eyes sinking into his. Ichigo involuntarily shuddered. Those eyes could bore holes in cement. They had stopped walking, and Rukia hadn't stopped looking at him. Oh crap, I better tell her I'm not going to accept, before she tells me off about leaving my family and all that responsibility. PFFF. I hate responsibility. He opened his mouth, but before he could say a word about him not accepting it, she said in a different kind of voice, You're going to accept it, right? Ichigo frowned. What was that look in her eyes? Worry, no, hope. This conversation was definitely weird. One of the few ones he had had with her without fighting. He was worrying about the weirdness of her face, when something hit him. Hard. Oi. Listen to me when I'm talking to you. She scowled at him, her usual facial expression coming back. Speak for yourself. Who was the one not listening to me a while back? Oops. Scrap that conversation with no fighting. He breathed out a little, relieved. She was normal. Or so he thought. Much later, Ichigo, plus a few bruises, and Rukia sat on an abandoned bench near the 5th Division headquarters. So. Ichigo turned to his smaller counterpart, scowling. His head was throbbing a little. So what? Rukia turned to look at him. Are you going to accept? Those eyes. Those DMN eyes. Her tone did not explain what she was feeling, but when Ichigo looked in her eyes, he knew. He knew she wanted him to accept. End flashback. In the end, he remembered vaguely that he had considered not doing the job. After all, too much paperwork was bound to be bad for one guy. And plus, he was expected to do this paperwork in the time of the school holidays. After doing mountains of paperwork at school, he would then be expected to do more mountains at Soul Society. All this he weighed into his mind, but Rukia, being Rukia, simply asked him if he was going to take the job. And Ichigo, being Ichigo, simply accepted the job. No buts or ifs. He continued looking at the closet. Soul Society, Rukia. This would be the first summer, starting his new job. A summer job, preparation, travel. Okay class, pack up. As soon as the words came out of the teacher's mouth, immediate turmoil prevailed. For about 2 seconds. The next 2 seconds was immediate verbal turmoil. Ichigo sighed. He put his books in his bag, and proceeded to stand up. Ai Chiyuria Gugu. A flying, crying, yelling, Kigo Asano. Disgusting, he thought, and proceeded to punch his friend as he flew towards him. He turned around, and saw most of his friends looking at him. He sighed inwardly. It was the last day of school for the year. He had to say at least something. Well, I guess I'll see you guys around. And with that, he turned and left Chad, Inoue, Ishida, Mizuiro, and a crying Kigo. He's been so distant lately. Everyone looked up, startled. Chad had actually said something. But, taking in what he had said, they nodded silently. Even more so than before, if that's possible. This time it was Ishida who spoke. The serious mood was broken by Kigo and a smirking Mizuiro. Even more so than before, if that's possible. Imitated Kigo in a high falsetto voice. Ishida glared at him through sun-reflecting glasses. As he opened the door, he was met with a terrific three-phase flying reverse kick. Well, an attempt. He lazily blocked his father's greeting, and returned one of his own, leaving his father sobbing and crying in a large indent on the family hall. So, Ichi and I, what are your plans for this holidays? Karen asked him curiously. They were at the dinner table now, munching on Yuzu's delicious food, although Ichigo would never bring himself to admit it. Yeah, Ichi and I, what are your plans? Joined in Yuzu. Before he could say anything, the sobbing of his father interrupted him. Old man. Ichigo turned to face his father. His forehead was smooth, but for one rather large vein on the side of his head. His father continued sobbing melodramatically. Yes, what are your plans? Last holidays we didn't even get to spend time together as father and son. Ichigo was about to hit his father, till what he heard hit him. The protruding vein stopped, and he sat for a moment. Yeah, I guess so. He turned and looked at his sisters' faces, full of hope. Ugh. Actually, He was cut off again by his father. I have the solution. Ishin stated, with one leg on the table, and his fist in the air. We will take a family holiday. He looked down expectantly at his children. And was met with fists and feet, and yells of, "Shut up old man," that must have been Karen, or, "Like hell I'll go on a holiday with you," definitely Ichigo, and, "Dad. Get your feet off the table." That must have been Yuzu. Ishin thought as he lay battered on the ground. Somehow, the dining table returned to normal. Well, what they thought was normal anyway. You can't have a normal meal in the Kurosaki household, general quote from the neighborhood. After some general munching, Ichigo finally spoke up, softer than usual. Actually, I'd like to spend the time with you guys, gesturing to his sisters, but I have a summer job. Instant pandemonium broke loose. Yells were heard throughout the neighborhood, and Ishin was behind his son, enthusiastically clapping him on the back. Good job my son. Karen was about to congratulate Ichigo as well. Hell, Ichigo never got a job during the holidays. That was until she heard the terrible pun her father had made. Smack. A slightly dazzled Ishin lay on the floor, with tears streaming down his face. I was being serious. Yeah, shut up. Good on you, Ichi and I. She paused in thought. What kind of job? Ichigo lay in bed, thinking over the events of dinner. He was still in his school uniform, with food stains all over it. The results of dinner were, as usual, harsh. Karen and Yuzu ended up asking so many questions that he felt his ears would burst. His father, on the other hand, was being unusually quiet. He exhaled. It wasn't like him to think like this. He looked over at his watch. 11:20 p.m. The rest of the family had gone to sleep, and he had to as well, to get to the place where the gate would be opened, designated by Yamamoto. Sure, the agreed time was ages away, sometime after breakfast tomorrow, but he still needed sleep. His thoughts drifted to his sisters' faces. He got up suddenly, and pushed himself out of his body. He walked lightly to his sister's room, and peeked in. They were sleeping soundly. After looking at them fondly, he then walked down the stairs. Opening the door silently, he slipped out, and closed it behind him. Breathing a sigh of relief, he proceeded to step on the footpath. "So, you really are going?" Ichigo stopped, knowing who it was without turning around. "Yeah." His father looked at the back his son's Shinigami form. "Do you still have that pendant I gave you?" "Yeah." His hands fingered the pendant, but he did not turn around to face his father. "Good. Keep it. Mum would have wanted you to have it." A pause. "Are you coming back?" "After the holidays." "I see. I'll take care of your body then." Another pause. "Idiot. You think your sisters are going to let you lie in the same position all holidays, while having a blank look on your face? Crap." He had forgotten about that. "Shut up, old man." "Ha. Goodbye, son." "Goodbye." He clutched the pendant in his hand in front of the Urahara shop. He raised his hand to knock, when the door suddenly slid open. He was met with the dark gaze of Kisuke Urahara. A few minutes later, the former captain guided him down into the training area. "The equipment is ready," Urahara said after a while. Ichigo scowled, confused. "How did you know I was coming, Sandal Hat?" "Oh, it's obvious." The scowl deepened. "I know it's obvious that I'm going to Soul Society, but even you should have known that I'm supposed to be traveling at a different time, at a different gate." "Oh." Ichigo sighed. He wouldn't get any information out of Urahara. How he knew what he knew was beyond Ichigo's understanding. ZZZT. The gate shot up. "Anyway, thanks a lot, Sandal Hat." He stepped in through the gate. "I'll be back after the holidays." ZZZT. The gate closed. Urahara looked at where the gate was. "I wonder what the boy is going to do." A summer job, meeting. Wah hi. One scream. That's all he would allow himself. Damn it. Ichigo cursed. I knew I should have waited. DMN that Sandal Hat. He decides to put me in this friken gate when that stupid cleaner is behind me. Ah. If anyone had heard Ichigo at that moment, they would have questioned his manliness. Even though, it's hard to act manly when a massive, spirit-eating boulder is rolling towards you at velocities close to the speed of light. DMNU Sandal Hat. Triple H-U. Tessai Tsukabushi looked up in surprise. Urahara looked back. You got a cold? No, must be these dusty boxes we're working with. Ichigo lay on the soft grass, his body relishing in the comfort and peace that they had been deprived of for the last few moments. It was still night at Soul Society, and, as he sat up, he guessed that they would start looking for him when he didn't turn up where and when Yamamoto had said. He looked behind him at the white walls that encompassed the court of pure souls. He said the last bit aloud. Pure souls my butt, he muttered, when he remembered that Rukia was there. Groaning, he stood up and started walking slowly towards it. Then, he grinned, and retraced his steps. This would be a good time to visit Kakaku Shiba. And, those of you who are unfamiliar with this name, it's the fireworks lady that shot up Ichigo and his friends in that gigantic cannon. Rukia stood on her balcony, feeling quite happy, even though she refused to believe it herself. Ichigo would be coming tomorrow. No, he'd be coming today, since it was already morning. A twinge of anxiety fluttered over her. She hadn't seen him in about 8 months. She wouldn't tell him that she worried about him. She wouldn't even tell herself that. That idiot better not have done anything stupid to hurt himself. No sooner had the words materialized in her brain, she heard the familiar clack 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 of the wooden hammer meeting the wooden emergency sign. Clack, clack. Instantly Byakuya was awake. He rushed out of his bedroom, still wearing his sleepwear, only pausing to grab his soul slayer. Who? We have an intruder in the court of pure souls, announced one Shinigami, looking quite proud that he knew before the others. What? A passing Shinigami looked at him. I said. The proud Shinigami was about to relay his precious message but was cut off. The second Shinigami turned away and shouted, "Hey guys! Wake up, we have an intruder." Oi! Wait a minute, I was just saying. The first Shinigami looked angry as he was cut off once again as a sleepy Shinigami rolled out of his quarters. Did you hear that, guys? An intruder. What? Where? Where? Look. I know. No one looked his way. The announcing Shinigami took one look at the frantic, growing crowd of Shinigamis pushing and yelling. Sighing, he let out an air bubble. Rukia quickly walked off her balcony, into her room, and down the stairs, but not before quickly changing into her Shinigami uniform and grabbing her Soul Slayer. Damn it, just when Ichigo is about to come, we have another invasion. She walked outside, and ran to the main court. Kuchiki Byakuya stood alone in the main court. Then, about 3 seconds later, he was joined with masses of Shinigami. Most of them, to Byakuya's displeasure, were wearing their uniforms, as if the day had just started. He only had noted this because he, in fact, was wearing his sleepwear. Of course, no one said anything, they were much too concerned about the alert than Kuchiki Byakuya's choice of clothes. However, they did note that he in fact, was Kuchiki Byakuya, and left him the customary 2-meter radius, while they waited. No one noticed the orange-haired Shinigami that appeared out of nowhere then, suddenly, appeared again next to the 6th Division captain. Oh. I must say, Kuchiki Byakuya, you look quite dashing with those new clothes. Kuchiki Byakuya whirled around at the familiar voice. You. Something clicked, and a loud roar of laughter that sounded suspiciously like a certain red-haired vice-captain was heard. Before Byakuya could find the offender, laughs started bursting out of nowhere, and then finally the mass of Shinigami that were in the main court started rolling along the tiled ground, laughing till their insides hurt. For once, the cool, composed 6th Division captain didn't say anything. Of course, he was still cool and composed, if not slightly flustered. He just glared at the orange-haired Shinigami. Not a normal, "I hope you die," glare, but one of those rare "I shall personally grind you to bits" glares. The crowd was still laughing, and Ichigo still smirking. Byakuya, of course, just kept glaring his glare. That was until a blur seemed to split the crowd in half, and Ichigo turned to see the bottom of a sandal. In the air, of course. And rushing to meet his face at a very uncomfortable speed. Wabum! The Shinigamis stopped laughing and gaped in wonder. This orange-haired Shinigami, one who dared insult the Kuchiki Byakuya, was just taken down by a much smaller Shinigami, and a girl at that. And, nothing wrong with being a girl, I assure you, but imagine, some guy teasing Kuchiki Byakuya, and getting away with it. Then a girl comes along and... Wabum! Yeah, you get the point. Kuchiki Byakuya let his "I shall personally grind you to bits" glare dissipate, and changed it to a half glare, half smirk. Half because it was hard for anyone, even Kuchiki Byakuya, to glare at someone that was getting stomped on by Kuchiki Rukia. Half smirk, because, it is, after all, Kuchiki Byakuya, and he never smirks fully. Whilst the crowd was busy gawking in amazement, he quickly flash-stepped out of the main court. He didn't want to be seen. Unfortunately, he ran into the very famous Toshiro Hitsugaya, smirking rudely as always, but somehow this one seemed to be rather annoying and knowing. He would have stopped to tell him off, but by the look on the prodigy's face he had heard everything that had happened. DMNU, Kurosaki Ichigo, Byakuya thought, while Toshiro was thinking, ha 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 ha. That was classic. He secretly disliked the proud captain of the 6th Division. However, he also valued his life, so he kept his smirk to a smirk and said nothing else. Ichigo. Ow, ow, ow. Okay, enough already, Have you learnt your lesson? Rukia's voice was like ice. Ichigo winced. He had once felt it when Hitsugaya Toshiro had gotten mad over some guy who had tripped over and fell on a certain vice captain. The temperature of the court of pure souls dropped by about 30 degrees. That, however, was nothing compared to the iciness in Rukia's tone. He smirked silently to himself. This was going to shorten his life by a large amount, but it would be worth it. He took a small breath and said, "Nope." The Shinigami crowd slowly backed away. There was a flaring spiritual power, belonging to a certain someone that they didn't want to mess with. Only a few remained, namely Toshiro Hitsuguya, who was there because he secretly wanted to see if any more funny things happened, but there was no way he was going to tell this arrogant, orange-haired, substitute Shinigami that, Momo Hinamori, who was there because a certain captain was there, Abarai Renji, who was there because he didn't want to leave Rukia the job of bashing the orange-haired Shinigami. He wanted a turn as well, and he didn't want to leave Rukia alone with a certain orange-haired Shinigami, and Kenpachi Zaraki, who was there because he wanted to see if Ichigo had gotten stronger, and wanted to fight, and wouldn't take no for an answer, because he hadn't fought in quite a long time, and also wanted to see if Ichigo knew anything about the alarm. Gosh, he's quick. A summer job, falling asleep. They lay on the soft grass together. She was feeling fine. He was feeling fine. Well, not as fine as her, due to the numerous amounts of bruises that had started appearing on his body. His mind drifted back to the events that happened just a couple of hours ago. Flashback. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The rest of the group that were there around them had somehow gathered a large sweat drop at the top of their forehead. And it dropped, simultaneously. Rukia-san. It was the quiet Hinamori that spoke up first. Huh? A puzzled Rukia slowly looked down at her feet, or more precisely under her feet. A dazzled Ichigo looked back at her. Oh. She grinned. Sorry, sorry. And smiled a perfect smile to Ichigo. The rest of the group had found that big drop of sweat again. Like a smile was going to fix up the Shinigami. Surprisingly enough, Ichigo only let out a groan, and sat up, scratching his head like nothing had happened. Renji looked on. Now that is definitely weird. Ichigo, not getting mad at Rukia for pummeling him. He's probably happy that he had gotten to see Rukia again. Toshiro Hitsugaya let out a loud sigh, visibly disappointed that nothing else funny was going to happen. He turned to leave, when he noticed that Kenpachi had opened his mouth to say something. Ichigo, did you know the alarm's been set off? Toshiro deadpanned. Hadn't Zaraki figured out by now that Ichigo was the cause of the alarm? He didn't say anything though. He wasn't scared of the 11th Division captain, it was just that people learned to stay out of dangerous places when you reached 150 years old. Toshiro's deadpanning was reflected in the others' faces. Ichigo spoke up first. Hey Zaraki, I was the alarm. Oh. Renji snapped out of his deadpanning after Ichigo. Ha ha ha. You mean you didn't know? You dumbass. He also snapped back to reality the next second. Oh, my, crap. Renji ran out of the main court screaming, with a bloodthirsty Zaraki behind him, unsheathing his sword. The others watched the two run out into the night. Hinamori snapped out of her deadpan next. And blushed. Shiro-chan, it's getting late. Can you walk me to my division? What? Toshiro looked at her. Then he looked away, his face as red paint. Ah no. Hinamori began again. No. What? Now it was Hinamori's turn to be surprised. I'll go, only if. Toshiro began. Only if. She hung on to his words. Only if you'd quit calling me Shiro-chan. So you'll come. Hinamori looked at him again, her eyes pleading. Fine. A scowling Hitsugaya stomped off. Then he abruptly stopped when Hinamori wrapped her arms around him from behind. Thanks. Shiro-chan. Don't call me Shiro-chan. Hinamori grinned. It was fun seeing him get so worked up. They continued walking to the path that would take them to the 5th Division quarters. Snickers were heard behind them. Toshiro turned around, his scowl deepening. Shiro-chan. Ichigo mimicked, the mischievous grin coming back to his face. Rukia tried to stop him but failed, breaking into fits of suppressed laughter. The main court suddenly felt a lot colder. Shiro-chan. A reprimanding gaze and the temperature went back to normal. Fine, we're going. Toshiro stuck his fingers in his ears, trying to ignore the hysterical laughter that floated from behind them. End flashback. After that, Ichigo thought, Rukia and me went up here. He rolled over to his side to watch the face of the raven-haired Shinigami that had changed his life. She was gazing into the stars. You know, you can go there. What? She scowled, not averting her gaze. The stars. Whatever. She glanced at him, giving him a whatever look. And, what other look would she give him? XD. Fine. Don't believe me. They drifted off into silence. Ichigo opened his mouth and yawned, in spite of himself. He hadn't slept, and he was understandably tired. Oi, Ichigo. What? I missed you. Same, Ichigo thought. He turned over to his side. Silence. Oi. Ichigo. He sat up straight. What? Are you even listening to me? She had sat up as well. He gave her a sideways glance. I am. No, you aren't. Why didn't you say anything? I did. No, you didn't. Well, I said something to myself. That doesn't count. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Rukia sighed inwardly. Ichigo was hopeless. What did you say to yourself anyway? Ichigo answered, still half asleep. What did you? Okay. Ichigo mumbled, not waking up even after Rukia's yelling. Yes, he really was tired. So. Oh, I said. He was almost falling down now due to his tiredness. What? He leant over, his intention to tell her what he had thought, but all of a sudden his head felt so heavy, that he promptly lay down on her lap. Ichigo. Ichigo was not in his right senses. He was now 3/4 asleep, and he didn't mind falling asleep on Rukia's lap. Oh yeah, I said to myself. He was muttering into her clothes. I said. Same. A few seconds later his breathing evened out, and he was asleep, leaving Rukia to wonder what the hell he meant by same, and what she was going to do the next morning when people found out that Ichigo was sleeping on her lap. Now, what did I say? Oh yeah, I said I missed him. And he said, same. She smiled contentedly to herself. Stuff tomorrow, and stuff what other people think. She absent-mindedly twirled his hair in her fingers. I'm tired as well. Luckily the night was warm, so she wouldn't get any sickness. Lying down, she drifted off into dreamland, with his hair still entwined in her fingers. A summer job, position. Renji groaned. Now, this groan wasn't your typical, oh crap, homework, groan, it was more like, oh crap, all my bones are dislocated, my ligaments are stretched, and if I move, I'll break, sort of groan. He had been chased around all night for laughing at a confused Saraki. Arg. DMN that Saraki. He had to take me seriously. The sunlight came streaming in through his window. Renji diverted his gaze to his table, where his clock lay. 5 a.m., vice captain's meeting in 1 hour. No, this time it was a combined meeting, due to the appearance of Ichigo. He closed his eyes. But, when he couldn't get back to sleep, he rolled out of bed, grunting as his muscles stretched, and changed into his Shinigami uniform. He was thinking of taking a little stroll before the vice-captain's meeting. It would do him good. Or so he thought. His little stroll ended prematurely when he saw Ichigo and Rukia sleeping together. He didn't know how long he gaped at them, it was really something he couldn't believe. Rukia and Ichigo fought over every single word, how could they possibly end up sleeping together? The good way, he thought, blushing furiously. Not that those two sleeping together were good, he thought jealously. 2. Sleeping together outside? What was Rukia thinking? Actually, what was Ichigo thinking? That bstrd, lying on her lap like, arg. He couldn't think of the word. Or, more accurately, he didn't want to say the word that he had learnt on his travels in the real world. Boyfriend. An involuntary shudder. Jeez. This was going to put him in a bad mood all day. Why? It's not like he actually liked. He stood there exasperated while Ichigo and Rukia slept peacefully. He stomped away, and then a little grin formed on his face. Oh, Tsutoyu. Renji sung out sweetly below his captain's quarters. He thought it was sweetly. The birds that were hanging around the captain's quarters didn't. They screeched and howled like their life depended on it, and it did, and flew away, gibbering, in their language, how Shinigamis came up with the worst wake-up jokes possible. An unruffled Kuchiki Byakuya slowly walked onto his balcony. Glided would be a better word. And also wearing his captain's robes once again. He would definitely not be caught a second time. He saw it was Renji and frowned. He had remembered that laugh that sounded distinctly like Renji when that brat humiliated him. What? Oh, Kuchiki Taishu, Renji said with a sickening smile, we still have 45 minutes till the meeting. Wanna come take a stroll? No. Byakuya turned and glided slowly back to his bedroom. Oh. That's too bad then. I guess I'll have to spy on Rukia and Ichigo all by myself. Byakuya stopped. Are you implying, Renji, that something might be happening between my sister and that brat? Even though he knew full well that there was something happening between his sister and that Kurosaki Ichigo, and it wasn't just friendship. Ever since Ichigo had left to the living world, Rukia had moped around. Well, not exactly moped around, she still did her duties, but she lacked the energy to do anything. Even with Renji around, she still lacked the will. When that brat showed up last night, he noticed, with interest, that somehow she felt more alive. Which was ironic really, seeing as she was dead already. They were all dead. But Kurosaki Ichigo wasn't. He was alive. And he made Rukia feel alive. Byakuya's thoughts were interrupted by Renji. Taicho? Renji's voice sounded a bit softer than usual. Yes. Don't worry about it. His usual look of glee was replaced by seriousness, something that was unusual. Byakuya looked at him one last time before going back to his bedroom. Renji had obviously been thinking about what he was thinking. Okay, Yamamoto's eyes scanned the room, we aren't all here. Renji snickered loudly. Yamamoto's eyes flickered over to the vice-captain of the 6th Division. Byakuya, if anything, looked unimpressed. Abarai Renji. Yes sir. I presume, by your earlier actions, that you know where Kurosaki Ichigo is? Yes sir. Get him. Yes sir. Renji ran back to the place where he had seen Ichigo and Rukia. They were still there, lying on the grass, sleeping. Oomph. A mischievous grin planted itself on his face. He took a deep breath. Wakey, wakey. Instantly the surrounding area was filled with flying birds. The birds that had rested on Kuchiki Taishu's residence had now moved to where Ichigo and Rukia were, note the past tense, sleeping. They had settled in with their feathered friends, thinking that they were safe from a certain red-haired Shinigami who had a wondrous voice. Unfortunately they were mistaken. The vice-captain had graciously enlightened them yet again, and they flew up in the air yelling, in their language, obscenities about the singer's mother. Ichigo leapt 5 feet into the air. Well, he would have leapt 5 feet into the air, if it weren't for a certain Shinigami who had sat up immediately. The back of his head met the bottom of her chin and they both collapsed, knocked out. Renji sighed. He had been so considerate, waking them up nicely, but no, they had to fake waking up, and go back to sleep. Sighing, he picked up the orange-haired Shinigami with one hand, and the raven-haired Shinigami with the other. Back in the meeting room, silence prevailed. Yamamoto Taishu? The speaker was none other than Momo Hinamori. Yes. Even though Kurosaki-kun is going to be Taicho, what about the other 2 spots of captain? Yamamoto looked at her. All we can do, is elect new ones. Murmurs passed throughout the room. Yes, this was going to happen sooner, but we weren't sure about the exact details of Aizen's departure. More murmurs. Now that we know, all we need to do is hold the general captain election. He paused, the murmurs were annoying him, though he didn't show it. Since, he looked sternly at Hinamori, who was whispering to the 10th Division captain, who was getting redder by the minute, since that the 3rd Division, and the 9th Division do not have captains to challenge, any Shinigami is allowed to take part against an existing captain. While discussing who was going to challenge who, the sliding door slid open loudly. There stood Renji, holding a dazed Ichigo by the back of his Shinigami clothes, and, Byakuya noted with a tiny hint of amusement, holding Rukia in his arms like a newborn child. If Byakuya could get any more amused, then this next moment would be it. The vice-captain abruptly dropped the orange-haired Shinigami on the meeting floor, and then placed Rukia gently outside the meeting hall, so that she was leaning against the wall, still sleeping. Oi! What did you have to do that for? Ichigo was now sitting, his eyes glaring at his red-haired friend. Shut up. I don't want to hear that from you, who dropped me down like a sack of potatoes. Shut up. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. And they were about to continue on their largely productive argument, which, by the way, was well structured, and had a couple of good points, when Kuchiki Byakuya coughed. Silence prevailed. Yamamoto motioned for the 2 Shinigamis to take their places, trying not to rub his temples with his idle hands. As you all know, Kurosaki Ichigo is now here to temporarily fill in the position of captain, over the 5th Division. The captains and vice-captains nodded. Good, that's settled. The old man looked around. Oh yes, Abarai Renji, you may be happy to know that there will be an all-out contest to see who takes the place of the 3rd squad captain, or the 9th squad captain. The others fidgeted. Like they didn't know this was coming. Of course Renji would have been placed in the captain's position. He had after all, learned his Bankai. The meeting continued. Hitsugaya felt bored. He looks bored, thought Hinamori. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Okay, he definitely didn't look bored now. You can't be bored and blushing at the same time. The redness contrasted with the whiteness of his hair. That same redness attracted Yamamoto. He looked over to the 150-year-old boy with amusement. Before you all leave, Hitsugaya Taicho will accompany Kurosaki Taicho today to work on his captaincy duties. Hitsugaya glanced up at the old man. Was that a glint of amusement in his eye? A summer job, business lunches, Part 1. An annoyed Hitsugaya stomped through the court of pure souls. Needless to say, an annoyed Hitsugaya meant a temporary season of winter. And half-frozen bodies to anyone who came within a meter radius to the prodigy. Of all of the people, Toshiro seethed. I have to take care of Ichigo. And of all of the people, that old geezer decided to choose me. Chuckling evilly to himself, Ichigo followed the miniature blizzard. Oh, Shiro-chan. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. A large vein proceeded to show itself on the back of the short captain's head. Don't call me that, Carrot Top. Tush, tush, why are you so angry? Ichigo asked, even though he fully knew the situation. Rukia had informed him of it before he left on his teaching tour with the prodigy. Apparently Toshiro and Hinamori usually ate lunch together, but couldn't, because of Ichigo. Ichigo had thought that this would be the perfect situation to get the child prodigy mad. Rukia, on the other hand, had other plans. She and Ichigo would have a picnic lunch together, and Toshiro and Hinamori could go somewhere together while they were having it. She told Hinamori this, and she was delighted to have someone so thoughtful as her new captain. Secretly she was worried that she would have to miss a day with her Shiro-chan. Ichigo promptly told her that it was Rukia's idea, but it got Hinamori thanking them all over again, that they both had to ask her to stop. When she skipped off, Rukia said in a rather sighing tone, "She's in love." Rukia then turned to Ichigo and said, "Go tell Hitsugaya Taicho. And behave." And here he was, behaving, if not having a little fun. Silence. "Yo, I asked you a question, shorty." The temperature dropped yet again, and Ichigo thought he better lay up on the provoking statements for a while, unless he wanted to end up inside of a freezer. It was a good choice. Teaching proceeded in a cold manner, literally, and lunch neared. Toshiro's stomach growled. Which reminded him of the fact that, since Ichigo was here, he couldn't eat with Hinamori. Because of this he started saying random comments about how Ichigo was going to make a bad captain, how he only beat Byakuya by chance, how he had no chance with Rukia etc. Ichigo, on the other hand, funnily enough did not get angry. He did however say, wouldn't it be funny if Hinamori suddenly got a large load of paperwork, out of nowhere? Hitsugaya stopped his comments, and proceeded to work in a more icy tone than ever. Ichigo chuckled to himself. This is too good, he thought, but he was secretly annoyed that the short captain had dared say that he had no chance with Rukia, not like he cared anyway. The lunch bell rang. Hitsugaya continued like nothing had happened. "Hey, Hitsugaya Taicho, let's get something to eat. I'm hungry." Ichigo explained. Toshiro gave him a cold look, but followed Ichigo outside the door. Ichigo looked around for Rukia. Yep, there she was, smiling prettily, while holding a lunch basket. Smiling prettily. Where did that come from? Ichigo scratched the back of his head. Hitsugaya, wait here. Ichigo said, as he promptly ran off to where Rukia was waiting, leaving the short captain to scowl at the scenery in front of him. As he reached her, he looked at her up and down. Something was different. She looked different. It must be her clothes. I haven't seen her, did you tell him? Rukia asked. He snapped back to reality. Nope. Baka. How the hell is he supposed to know what to do? He replied, scratching his head. He was about to say something else, like he didn't care what happened to the snotty brat, when he was interrupted. Shut up. Look, Rukia hissed. They looked over to where Hitsugaya was standing, and suddenly the temperature went back to normal. They saw the reason running over to the surprised captain. Rukia, even though she was Rukia, was still a girl, and wanted to wait to see what happened next, as throughout the Court of Pure Souls the relationship between the 10th Division captain and the 5th Division vice-captain was one that many a Shinigami pondered upon, and it definitely was top on their list of couples to be. Rukia prided herself with knowing such knowledge, though she kept it to herself, as she knew that Byakuya-sama wouldn't be very pleased if he found her gossiping. Even though she did know a lot, she didn't know that the next on the list of couples to be was her paired up with certain new captain. Funnily enough, Byakuya knew of this, but he didn't say anything, as, after all, he did have an image to keep in front of his little sister, and there was no way that he was going to tell her that he had been sneaking around, trying to catch up on the latest gossip on his sister. No, he wasn't overprotective. Not overprotective at all. Sadly, Ichigo was new to the Court of Pure Souls, and he didn't give a DMN about the relationship between his vice-captain and the short prodigy. He probably would have given a DMN if he found out that most of the Shinigamis in the Court of Pure Souls thought that he and Rukia were more than just friends. He looked down at Rukia, who was watching them with undivided interest. He looked away, embarrassed. Even if he was Ichigo, it still is hard to keep a straight face when your girlfriend, nope, correction, friend who is a girl, openly stares at a couple. He grabbed her slender arm and marched off. Come on, I'm hungry. What? Oh come on Ichigo, grow up. But I have my captain training, and... She cut him off by placing a finger to his lips. He was about to say that Hitsugaya was going to kill him, which was probable. Since when have you been so girly? Rukia asked him, with a mischievous smile. Since, what? Shut up. I'm not girly. This comment hurt his pride, especially coming from her. R2. I am not. R2. Ichigo opened his mouth to say another I am not, but he stopped when he felt Rukia's fingers grabbing onto his hands. Look, just come with me okay? Fine, fine. He mumbled, and allowed himself to be led off to Rukia's hometown. Hitsugaya's going to kill me when I come back, you know. Shut up. Defeated sigh of air. Actually, Hitsugaya wasn't thinking about killing anyone at that particular moment. Quite the opposite really. Hinamori had explained everything to him, and he realized that Ichigo was just hiding it from him all along. Now, if someone else had explained to him what was happening, he might have called out his ice dragon. However, it was Hinamori talking to him here, so he let his anger slide. They sat up on the rooftop, gazing at the sky. They had finished their lunch rather quickly, well, Toshiro had finished his rather quickly, anyway. In front of a very embarrassed Hinamori, he had gulped down all the helpings of food in less than 5 minutes. She had scolded him for eating too much, but inside she was secretly glad because he had eaten her food so enthusiastically. She rolled over, gazing at her young friend. Did you like it? Like what? He was so dense. The food, she said in a flat voice. Oh. He turned over to his side, his back facing her face. Yeah, I liked it. A few moments of silence. You're a really good cook. Thank you. Awkward silence. Why aren't you looking at me? She asked, truly puzzled. It's nothing. Hinamori frowned. Shiro-chan was being a bit weird today. Shiro-chan, she sang sweetly, look at me when you talk. No. There was no way in hell, or Soul Society, for that matter that he was going to face her, blushing like a beetroot. When she said his name like that. Okay, blushing like a beetroot was over. It was more like, his face was a beetroot. What? She sounded like she hadn't even listened to him. I said, no. I'll make you. No, you won't. Hinamori grinned. It was her childhood friend, and she knew just how to make him move. She slowly raised herself on one elbow, and then grabbed him by the ribs. She knew where his ticklish spots were, she thought, as she tickled him from behind. Wah, hey, sto haha stop that haha. Hitsugaya was laughing uncontrollably. Leave it to Hinamori to know everything about him. Well, almost everything. Toshiro summoned up his remaining strength and turned to face her. She was still tickling him, so he grabbed her, and tickled her back. The sounds of laughter could be heard for miles, but of course, it was lunchtime, and most of the Shinigami were indoors. Suddenly the laughter stopped. As it was, the two were on a roof, and a roof is, after all, slanting. Their tickling round had ended up with the both of them rolling towards the end of the roof, rolling towards the ground. It was quite a drop. Toshiro braced himself for the impact, making sure that he was the one hitting the ground. Thud. The two had fortunately hit a grassy slope, tumbled down, and came to rest at the foot of a sakura tree. Hitsugaya was knocked out from the impact, but Hinamori was still conscious. Conscious, however, with an unconscious Hitsugaya on top of her, his chin resting on her shoulder. Hinamori blushed furiously. Shiro-chan. Shiro-chan. This time a bit louder. For a second she contemplated staying like this. After all, this was probably as close as she was going to get to the white-haired prodigy. Since he did nothing to notice her feelings. Shiro-chan. This time Hitsugaya answered. His eyes half opened, as he put his hands down in front of him to prop himself up. Are you okay, Hinamori? She nodded, barely, but her face was getting redder by the second. Hitsugaya looked confused for the space of about 1 second, then he looked down to where Hinamori was looking. So that's what he was holding himself up on. Wah! This wah, greatly minimized by the way, was joined by a female voice that screamed quite loudly, the words that no man wants to hear from his girlfriend, or potential girlfriend for that matter, pervert. Yuck. Kigo, that was disgusting. Ms. Wiro winced, wiping off the beads of, well you know. Shut up, you just sneezed a second ago. Kigo said, wiping his nose. They were in the middle of an eatery, and were in the process of analyzing the aspects of the human body, female species, namely, girl-watching. Ha! At least it was controlled. Oomph. Kigo looked away. It's 'cause you're a girl. But it's weird, Ms. Wiro said, as his gaze was diverted again, this time by an older woman. I don't have a cold. Same, Kigo said wanly, as he followed Ms. Wiro's gaze. A summer job, business lunches, part 2. Rangiku Matsumoto sighed after finishing off the book, The Princess and the Picnic. Now that, she declared to her captain, who was acting rather strange of late, was a real love story. The captain looked up, obviously not listening to a word she said, just that it was a force of habit to look up when someone was talking to him. Matsumoto had once told him he did this because he was shorter than everyone else, and it took 2 full days to defrost her. Despite this incident, she was still willing to tease her captain to bits. What? I said, this is a real love story. She held the book in her hand and waved it over the couch. Oh. At the mention of the word love, she felt her captain go rigid. She wondered if it had anything to do with a certain 5th Division vice captain. Hitsugaya bent down to finish his paperwork, which he left during the morning to look after Ichigo. It was after lunch, the time most Shinigamis were lazing around. Hitsugaya Taicho, you don't want to know what happened? No. Matsumoto shuddered. So cold. An evil grin spread across her face. She knew that the subject of love was continually avoided in the 10th Division, well in the hearing range of the captain, who was actually failing at love at the very moment. Anyway, she announced in an eerily cheery voice, I'll tell you what happens. She cautiously looked up from her couch. Her captain was still bending over his desk, completing paperwork, though it was obvious that he had heard what she had said, despite the fact that he didn't say anything. So, there was this prince, and he met this princess. She peeked up from behind her couch. And do you know how they met? Hitsugaya sighed. It was obvious that he wouldn't get much paperwork done with his lazy vice-captain, well lazing around. And plus, he had to put up with her annoying voice, telling him an annoying story. He might as well listen. No, I don't know how they met. Do enlighten me. He said in a sickly sweet tone, that could probably rival Rukia's acting voice. He picked up his cup of tea, and proceeded to sip it in an annoyingly adult manner. Matsumoto looked at her captain, delighted, completely ignoring his sickly sweet tone. Well, it happened like this. The princess was so bored of her castle, that one day she decided to take a picnic. She looked up in surprise as she saw her captain nearly choke on his tea. She raised an eyebrow. And it seemed like it was getting a bit colder. So she went on her picnic, but she got a bit bored by herself. So she decided to invite her childhood friend, who was the neighboring prince. At that time, they didn't have any feelings for each other though. She looked up again in surprise, when her captain had choked yet again, and the temperature had gone down. A lot. Is something wrong, Hitsugaya Taicho? She watched him carefully. Maybe she shouldn't have told him the story after all. But this kind of behavior, even for him, was quite different. No, nothing's wrong. Hitsugaya managed to squeak out. He stood up shakily. Bathroom. And he was off, leaving a very puzzled Matsumoto behind. Ah, I didn't get the good part. She lay back on the couch to read the last paragraph again. The princess and her prince skipped happily down the sunny lane. The princess held her prince's hand while they skipped, and in her other hand she was swinging a picnic basket. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Far away, in some corner or another of Seoul society, the princess was skipping happily down a sunny lane. Actually, it was Rukia, and she wasn't skipping. She was, however, holding her prince's hand, except for the small fact that it was Ichigo, and the only reason why she was holding his hand was because she was dragging him along the ground. It was such a picturesque moment. Come on, Yoidoti. Look, we're here. Rukia had stopped pulling Ichigo, and had led him up to an overhang which looked over the 78th district of Rukongai. Ichigo stopped, rubbing his arm, and looked up. It was now mid-afternoon, and the warm sun was comfortable on his back. The city actually looked decent from here. It looks nice. Yeah. The two stood there, looking down at the city, which Rukia had grown up in. It was so different from what he had imagined, Ichigo decided. Standing behind Rukia, he noticed what had caught his attention when he was looking for her when he was with Hitsugaya. She was wearing contemporary-style clothes, which was strange since they were in Seoul society. Now that he came to think of it, he had only seen her in her school uniform, one of Yuzu's dresses, her Shinigami uniform, and, once, in her kimono. This was the first time he had seen her wearing jeans. Oi, Rukia. She didn't stop looking down at the town. What's with your clothes? Huh? This time she turned around to look at him. She looked down at what she was wearing. Oh, these. She shrugged, almost embarrassed. Well, I got some tailors to make me some clothes, that were more your style. Huh? Ichigo looked confused. My style? She blushed furiously. No, idiot, I meant, the style of the living world. She turned away from him. Ichigo, being Ichigo, got absolutely none of this, but he did understand that Rukia was turning away from him, and that he had done something wrong. He shrugged. Well, no need to get so mad about it. Geez, I was just going to say that it looks good on you. As if realizing what he just said, his face went red. Rukia turned around, and all of a sudden, the ground beneath them had just become a whole lot more interesting. Oh. The silence was unbearable. Anyway, aren't we going to have this, picnic? Ichigo asked, still looking at the ground, with one hand scratching the back of his neck. Why, yeah. Rukia hurried past him to lay the cloth on the ground, underneath a large, overhanging tree. Here, let me help. Ichigo took the basket from Rukia, and started laying the contents on the mat. Slowly, but surely, a large bead of sweat started to form at the back of his head. Rukia? Yeah. Why isn't there any bowls? The large bead of sweat was mirrored by Rukia. Ichigo sighed. Leave it to you to get everything, except the bowls. Hey. It's because I was working so hard on the meal. Yeah, so hard that you forgot to bring something to eat it in. Shut up. Anyway, look, she pointed to 2 pairs of chopsticks. At least we have them. Oh yeah, and what am I supposed to do with chopsticks without a bowl? Eat from the container, idiot. Rukia proceeded to break up her pair of chopsticks, and grabbed a large helping of noodles from the container. I've done it lots of times, she announced proudly. The large bead of sweat dropped. Geez, fine. Ichigo sighed as he scooted closer to Rukia. He waited till she had started chewing on her noodles before digging his chopsticks into the container. He just realized how hungry he was, and proceeded to eat the noodles. However, being Ichigo, he took such a large helping that he couldn't eat it all in one bite, so he let some of the noodles hang down over the container. Rukia finished her first mouthful, swallowed, and said, "Yuck. Don't slobber all over the container." Ichigo, with his mouth still full, replied angrily, "Itf woudent had happened if Thumon had bort a bor." Rukia stared at him,